Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Sif, and today we've got a fun high funds game to take a look at. High funds is always fun, but this one is especially fun. It's a very old game. I think it's from almost 3 years ago now, and this is myself against Witty, who, if you're not familiar, I don't think he's been too active recently. But he used to play a lot of high funds, and he likes to pick Rachel. And I'm playing Andy this time. Also, yeah, like I said, this is an older game. I think we didn't play this perfectly, but I think that just makes it more interesting, more exciting. You'll see how it plays out. So this map is called Coat of Arms. It is a map that has been heavily edited, I believe. Um, but I like this old version too. I think it's cool. There's a lot of interesting features to this map, but we'll talk about them as we go through the game. As far as the matchup goes, this is the old High Funds Tier 3, which has Rachel and Andy in the same tier. I think Andy is now considered Tier 2 in High Funds, although that's kind of a tough tier for him to compete in because he's got to fight against like Von Bolt and Max and things like that. So maybe he's kind of in between tier 2 and tier 3. Let's see here. Rachel. Okay, let's talk about the COs a little bit. Rachel has. She's like very. They're both very focused on their superpower, on their super CO power. Rachel's super CO power launches 3 missiles that do 3 damage each. And so she's very strong against clustered units. Andy is going to, his superpower is going to repair all of his units by 5 HP and increase their movement by 1 and increase their firepower a little bit. And Rachel also has a CO power, which boosts her luck, which is not bad. We'll see how that plays out in this game. It might come up. Let's see. Okay, let's talk about high funds just very briefly. If you're not familiar, this is a mode where all of the properties are worth 2,000 per turn instead of 1,000, so you have double the income. And what does that do to the game? Basically, it means that you can afford the more expensive units quite easily. So that is going to increase the range of available units that are viable in any given match, and it's also going to make powers charge faster, and it's going to make a lot of them stronger as well. So you can get very dynamic, explosive games in high funds, and that's why it's so much fun. So let's see, there's a lot of interesting things to talk about in this game, so I think we're just going to get started here. So in high funds, since the properties are worth twice as much, and we have this pre-deployed airport, I'm going to start, I'm an orange star and Witty is pink Cosmos, but he's actually player 1 here, despite the colors, just so you're aware. I get this city pre-owned in order to basically even out the starting income. So he's going to capture that first. We're just going to go through and capture our properties here. So, like I mentioned, there's a pre-owned airport here. And there are all these cities back here that can only be acquired using a T-copter. And T-copters are pretty good in high funds because, again, since the properties are worth twice as much, when you accelerate your income by moving an infantry up to capture a property sooner than it would get there just by walking, you are able to make up the cost of your transports much faster. There's another reason why transports are good in high funds, and that's because infantry die very easily. And so having the ability to replace them is very important. Not only are there these little cities here and these islands, but there's also these corner islands with the airport. So this property pair is going to be pretty important. We definitely both want to capture that at some point. So I'm going to move my first T-copter to use this infantry and move it all the way onto this mountain because I've got a plan here. And my plan is basically, these two cities look very contested to me. So I'm going to try and secure them early and then hold on to them because that will give me an income advantage if I can manage it. So that's kind of my opening strategy here. You see, we each have 3 T-copters. We're spamming the T-copters. They're really good. I get a little boost here for the port. Woody's doing something similar down here. And I'm charging forward to grab this city. I want to get that before any vehicles can show up. I'm going to open anti-air. So you can, another thing about high funds, you can open a lot of different vehicles. Typically in standard, you would open tanks, sometimes artillery, sometimes battlecopters. In fog, you would typically open tanks, recons, or sometimes artillery. Sometimes you can do transports as well. But in high funds, you can kind of open any vehicle. You can even save up money for tech units. And tech units would be ones that are like, there's not really like, you don't really unlock tech units in Advance Wars, but that's just like nomenclature for units that cost like more than 10k, I guess you could say. So from the airport, that would be fighters, bombers, stealths. From the base, it's going to be rockets, medium tanks, neo tanks, mega tanks. And then the port, it's going to be, I guess, cruisers, subs, battleships, and carriers. So I'm opening an anti-air because there are no tanks on the battlefield, and there are all of the units on both sides are vulnerable to anti-air. Anti-air also has the advantage of knocking. Oh, I've got my damage calculator here. So let's take a look at that. What does the anti-air do to a well, let's take a look at a tank first, because that's typically what you would open. So a tank on a city, assuming you have your tower, it's like a 50-50 chance to reduce a capturing infantry below 5 HP. And reducing a capturing infantry below 5 HP is going to delay the city for an extra turn. But an anti-air, you see it knocks it all the way down to 2. Without the tower, it's going to be a little bit less. It's going to be 3. But you can see that when your properties are worth twice as much, expending your vehicles to delay captures is actually much more worthwhile. So it can make sense to actually open an anti-air under those circumstances. You also see people will build more recons. Generally, you'll just be more willing to sacrifice vehicle HP to delay captures in high funds. Okay. Oh, let's see here. All right, let's keep going here. So he's going straight for the airport in the corner there. Because you have so much money in this mode, the airports see a lot more use. So he built 3 T-copters, and then now he's going to start building battlecopters. And he wants to capture this airport to potentially build even more battlecopters. But you can really get a lot of unit count from your airports in high funds. Very valuable. I'm going to go up there too, I guess. It's been a long time since I played this game. But I did take a peek at it before recording, so we'll see how much of it I remember. Okay, so now we're starting to go back here, capture these backward island properties. Very inconvenient. You have to drop off the infantry, then you have to start the capture, then you have to finish the capture, then you have to bring the T-copter back to pick up the infantry, or just leave them there. So it makes sense to go for these last. Once you have your infantry allocated for these more contested ones in the middle. Okay. So, we're about to see some action right away. Pretty early on in this game. I'm going to go for the interrupt on his city. The double interrupt. And like I showed you in the damage calculator, this is knocked down to 2. So instead of finishing, if this was a tank, it could finish in 1 additional turn. Now it's going to take 4 additional turns. Of course, he's got this other infantry. He can just start capturing with that instead. So we'll see. See what happens here. So let's talk about the composition. Composition is very important in high funds. And that's just going to be the types of units that you're building and the order that you're building them in. So I'm opening pretty artillery heavy because there is some useful terrain here. And this is going to serve 2 purposes. The first is that, like I said before, my strategy is to control both of these properties in the center, and that's going to give me an income advantage. And I can use this terrain to set up with the artillery and cover this property, and potentially put one here in the middle where I've got all my reinforcements coming in to protect it, to secure this. I can even put it on this city to lock this down. The other reason why I'm building a lot of artillery is because you're going to see as our builds get more developed in the next couple of turns, kind of what we're going for strategically. But part of my plan is that I want to dominate the heavy tank fights. And that's going to be medium tanks and neo tanks. And artillery gives you extra firepower against heavy tanks. But we'll talk about that more as they show up. Okay, so he's going to go in here and punish my interrupts. And he's got something very clever here. He's moving the T-copter up to block me in here. And now he's going to move this 2 HP infantry into the T-copter and boost it behind my anti-air, out of range of my infantry. So this is a very clever trap. I did not see this coming. I definitely remember this. I was very impressed by that and upset about it as well. So what can I do here? I can shoot this infantry, or I can shoot this infantry. They're both going to finish a capture in 1 turn. I figure I'd rather finish off a unit if I have to pick. Got my artillery set up here. That's very difficult to interrupt. And let's see here, I moved my T-copter up here to block this property from his capture. Just costing him 2,000 gold, basically, for a turn. My poor anti-air. It's doomed. B-copter out of range of this anti-air. It was in range of this anti-air, but now it's dead. So, doing a good job of taking advantage of this terrain being in the way of covering my own units. So this is interesting. He's going to attack my T-copter. So I'm playing Andy, obviously, which means that potentially this is going to get healed back up. And the T-copter is going to perform its function regardless of how much HP it has, up until the point where it's destroyed. So, in a sense, this is potentially a bad move because I'm just getting, what is that? 500, 2,000. I get 1,000, or I get 2,000 charge from this towards my power. So we'll see if that ends up mattering. It probably won't. It usually doesn't, but that's something to think about. If you're attacking transports, just keep in mind that they can still do their job until you finish them off. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, so now we're starting to see the heavy tanks rolling out. Moving towards the mid game. The capture phase is more or less over. Got all my artillery kind of clustered up here, locking down this city. So my strategy is basically to hold on to both of these like I mentioned before, and then just have more big tanks. Very simple strategy. That's good for Andy because Andy typically wants to focus on heavy tanks because they're more difficult to destroy. And Andy's superpower is best with units that can't be one-shot easily. So you want to force your opponent to make multiple attacks to finish off your units so that you can't just heal them back. And that's very effective on units like this that have a lot of defense. Or another way to look at it is that if you just like count up the units in his army that can threaten these units, it's a very small proportion of his army. So he's got one Neo-tank and one battlecopter, 2 battlecopters that can really even make a dent on either of these units. And none of those units can destroy them outright on its own. So he's trying to get these frontline cities. Building lots of light vehicles. I'm setting up to capture this one. Moving up in this direction to threaten that city. Not going to be able to interrupt it this turn, but I have enough things that I could potentially attack the infantry if, you know, and maybe clear it and then threaten the city afterwards, depending on where he puts his army. So it's pretty clear that he wants to take this from this positioning. He builds a bomber, so I'm going to build a fighter. I'm going to go in up here, like I said before. Try and pick off an infantry and then potentially capture this city next turn. We'll see how that goes. Mechs are useful. This is the great thing about high funds. You really just get to build everything. Typically, mechs aren't great. With Andy, they're a little bit better because, you know, they can suffer first strike and then heal up and they get +1 movement. But when you have 3 T-copters already, then mechs start to make more sense. Okay, so he's going to go in here. He's going to do quite a bit of damage, actually. I don't think that I should have gone for this. I think that was just a mistake. Because it's even worse than it looks. He's killing my tank, my infantry, and knocking my artillery down to 2 HP. Another infantry to 2, another infantry to 4. But then he builds a battleship, which I think at the time I did not consider. Didn't really think about that possibility. Which kind of shuts down this push up here all on its own. I can't really afford to fight in range of this. It's covering most of his units up here. So although I've got, you know, I've got strong units prepared to counterattack, I can't really afford to keep fighting in this area anymore. So I'm going to stay out of its range and come down here and interrupt that capture, because what I really want is to not let him take that. As you can see, we've captured everything now. I'm up 4,000 a turn to his, I'm up 52k to 48k. So over time, that is going to matter. Not only is it going to be just like more raw money, but it might help me hit breakpoints on my tech units that he can't reach. So I'm just kind of bringing everything together, sort of deathballing in the middle, because I realized that I made a couple mistakes so far. So I'm just going to consolidate my army and make sure that I can deal with whatever he's got going here. So at this point, you can really see the difference in our compositions. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 neo tanks and 2 medium tanks. I've got a bunch of artillery. He's got 1 neo tank, and his money is mostly spent. He's got a bomber and a battleship. Bomber is a really good build against neo tanks, of course. You really want as many ways to just like knock them out in one hit as possible. And so if you, and the bomber has one extra movement, and it's also got perfect movement because it's a flying unit. So if you can just like throw your bomber into a neo tank at any point, that's very worthwhile, because then they have to have anti-air or a fighter to counter hit. But I mean, you're already winning that trade basically. So bomber is very good. Like I said, I'm very heavy on big tanks. He is not so much, but that's okay because he's playing Rachel. And I think that his thinking here is, he's going to use his powers to leverage these light vehicles. You see, he's got like more light tanks and more B-copters. So let's take a quick look at the damage calculator again. And you can see, so Rachel, like I said before, has 2 powers. She's got her regular power, which is going to increase her luck range from 0 to +39, which is pretty high. And since luck is flat damage that applies equally against any unit, it's going to be particularly effective in high funds. And since he's more invested in light vehicles, that means he's just going to have additional attacks that he can make compared to my composition, which is, you know, more focused on these individual powerful units. So using those multiple attacks, he can threaten my tech units using his power. So Battlecopter on a Neo tank or medium tank is like reasonable attack to make to begin with. But when you check the power, you see that you get like a very high upside from the luck, and there's still very little downside. Now you can look at like a tank. You still have that upside, but there's considerable downside. If you don't high roll, then you're taking a ton of counter damage. So the Battlecopter is really great. Infantry, also pretty cool. You get like a potentially huge upside for the cost against tech units. So that's interesting to consider. Of course, Rachel's Super CO power, also really good. It's going to damage my units, and then she can use her, her extra attacks from having these extra vehicles to just clear them off after they're damaged. So it makes a lot of sense from Rachel's perspective to go for this slightly different composition. So we're committing, now Whitty is committing up here on the top side of the map pretty heavily. We've got a carrier to cover the battleship, which also locks the airport in the corner. His battleship is locking my port. So it looks like he's kind of trying to make a play in this direction. But at the same time, you see the rest of his army is kind of pulled back a bit. And I think that is because these units, these big tanks, create a lot of initiative. They can kind of just create space and take attacks and threaten attacks that the light vehicles can't until these are cleared out of the way. So he's got to take a slightly more defensive position here. We're both kind of poised to... He could go down here. I could go in either direction. So let's see what happens. Seeing that he pulled back a little bit, I'm going to take that space that I've created, move up a little bit more, and then kind of threaten in this direction. So he's kind of pinned back here against his mountains. I'm over the center line. Let's see what he goes for. Okay, so this is interesting. He's really moving in on this corner now. He's got a T-copter in range of my airport. Kind of frightening. He's putting a tank on top of my port, so I can't build a battleship. Because Andy battleships are pretty good because they can be hard to clear, which means that with my superpower, I'm going to get plus 5 HP on it, plus the repairs from the city. So I can counterattack pretty strongly the turn after I build it, even if it takes first strikes. I think he's noticing that he's kind of light on the heavy tanks, and that's reducing his options a bit. So last turn he built a medium tank, and now he's building another Neo tank. Building a fighter to match my fighter and my bomber. This is very, very common. I think if your fighter can reach the area that the bomber is threatening in the same amount of turns or a reasonable time frame, that is almost always preferable to anti-air, because anti-air it's very cost effective against a bomber, but it does not threaten as many tiles, whereas the fighter has like a massive range at 9 movement. And SL just like cleanly one-shots bombers, which is very important, especially against Andy. Okay, so he's He's got his whole army in this little area now. He can go over here if he needs to. Although it looks like now he sees that I'm creating this threat down here. He wants to respond to this. So I'm going to go up here, I guess, first. We're going to attack his tank here. Oh, I've got a rocket. So my thinking is that I'm going to use this rocket to prevent the infantry from capturing my airport, because I really don't want to lose my airport. That would be bad. Because if I lose the airport, then the port is threatened. If the port is threatened, then he can take the port, and then the port threatens the base, and it's like a cascade of unfortunate events that will cause me to lose the game. So I'm going to move a lot of my indirects in this direction. You can see not only are indirects good against heavy tanks, but they're also good against ships. They do a lot of damage to ships. We can check the artillery. Just so you can get an idea. That's a pretty good chunk. And against the carrier, it's a little more even. So since I'm Andy, I can move these up. They can take a first strike from a battleship or a battlecopter, and then they heal back up and then do a bunch of damage on the counterattack. I've also got a bomber, does huge damage to naval units. Really good counter for them. And battlecopters can threaten them too. So I'm just going to use this combination of units that can threaten these sea tiles, basically. And then at the same time, I'm going to move down here because there's not much in this area. It's all up here. So this city is basically free. And I'm going to get greedy again, though, like I did before. And I'm going to go for both of these cities. I'm also going to make a big mistake here. I put my medium tank in range of his medium tank. I'm not sure why I did that. Like I said, this is a really old game. I'm not exactly sure what I was thinking at the time. But I think this could have been done a lot more safely. Let's see how this plays out, though, and then we'll take a look. So he's going to pop the Lucky Lass. That's the Rachel power. So we already talked about this a little bit. It gets better in high funds because the luck is a flat damage that's going to work against any unit, regardless of the damage matrix. That's really close, but let's check it anyway. So with the power, it's 88 to 115. So slightly better than 50-50 odds to clear that. Okay, this is the big one. He one-shots my medium tank on the shoal. This is very unfortunate. This is not good for me. Let's take a look at that. You don't want to sleep on Rachel CO power, because sometimes it just blows you out. This is a lot of damage. Yeah, I should not have put my medium tank here. But let's finish this turn and then we'll go back and see what we could have done differently. He gets the one-shot kill on the battlecopter. This is 78 to 117. So that's another, again, it's about 50-50, a little under 50-50 to get the one-hit kill. Oh, and let's talk about Andy battlecopters briefly here. So without the power, it's going to be 71 to 80. So it's likely that this attack without any powers would reduce my B-copter to 3 HP. So I'll be at 3. I'm going to counterattack back. He'll be at 8. Okay, so then let's say it's my turn, and I pop my superpower. Well, now I have 8 HP, and I get to attack back with increased firepower. And this basically knocks him down to 1 probably, 1 or 2. So this is at the end of the exchange. But keep in mind that this is his first strike that he's making. So this is the power of Andy, is your units have to be finished off by the time your power rolls around. Otherwise, you're going to get really big value. I think actually in this game he does a good job of that, of killing my units. And that's another benefit of the luck, is that you're just cleanly finishing off units with 1 strike. Doesn't really get too lucky here. I think that could have easily been a kill. Also, that could have easily been a kill on the mech. We can look at this one. It's a bomber on a Neo tank. And it's on a silo. So 75 to 102, which means that he's hitting on the higher end of the luck range here. And he's able to finish off with an infantry. So you would not have been able to make that kill without the Rachel power once again. So I'd say it's pretty successful turn here from Witty. The infantry is dropped. It's going to threaten the capture next turn. So this looks bad. I had like a bunch of units here, and now a lot of them are dead. He built another battleship here to dissuade me from continuing to fight over here in this area. So let's go back real quick and just see the difference. So I lost these infantry, and then this got chunked. So obviously, if I were to do this again, I would not want my medium tank in range of his medium tank. I can also move the artillery out of range of his tank. So I think that I would put the artillery here on this forest, which is out of range of both the tank and the medium tank. Still covers this infantry. And then it covers this tile, which means that this infantry here can only be threatened efficiently from the road. So I think I would just let him attack from the road if he wants to, and then I'm going to be like in a more safe position to counterattack potentially. So this is just a little greedy. Yeah, this definitely should be on the road, and then this guy should be like back at least 1 tile. If he's back with just 1 tile, it's probably safe. So yeah. But the good news is I've got my Super CO power here. I don't have a ton of damaged units, but I have some. And it's also going to give me a little extra firepower, a little extra defense, and movement. So let's see here. Oh, I do get this city. So for all of my effort here, I have flipped at least 1 city, which is flipping cities really good in high funds. That's a 4K income swing. So he's losing 2 and I'm gaining 2. Okay, so here comes the hyper upgrade. Can I heal all my units up and get that firepower bonus? Try and trap him in there, I guess. That's the plan. Without the super, I wouldn't have been able to clear that tank. Although I could have used the artillery, I guess. But now I get a free attack over here. And now the anti-air on his bomber. Very important hit. So now we're just really brawling here in the center. I match his battleship with my own. I guess the thinking here is that this medium tank is like kind of stuck, although it's not really. I think he can free that. Moving my bomber. Oh, there was an interesting moment here. Okay, so he could have taken a shot at my Neo tank with the battleship. I think he was just worried about I just have like too much stuff over here. I can move this artillery, this rocket gets in range next turn. With the superpower, the bomber threatens his carrier, so that would have to move. And but we can look at the. Let's just take a quick look at the battleship with the power against the Neo tank on the forest. So it's 48 to 79, which is a pretty juicy hit. But it doesn't finish off the Neo tank, and I'm gonna have my superpower next turn. So I think he sees that it's just not worth it for him, because I'll heal it all back. A bit of an Andy moment there. Okay. So now he's going to start this capture here. I've got my rocket in range. You can see the difference in our compositions now. I hit his bomber, which is very important. He's got 2 Neos and 1 medium tank. I lost my medium tank last turn, but I still have 1. And I have 3 Neo tanks. I also have 2 bombers. So I just have more ways to threaten his heavy tanks than he has ways to threaten my heavy tanks. And my plan is that fact, in conjunction with my modest income advantage, is going to, that's my win condition basically, is to just end up with more heavy tanks than he has ways to deal with. So I'm in range of his battleship. We're definitely brawling here at this point. Just trying to do as much damage as possible, as efficiently as possible. So he's going to finish off the artillery here. Finish off my medium tank. It's going to be a little bit before my next superpower comes back, but he doesn't want me to have units to heal with it. Okay, we can talk about something else here, which is useful to know. Let's talk about a little bit about evaluating army value. So if we go back a few turns here, the way that you're going to evaluate army value is normally at the start of your turn, you're going to be down half of your income in army value relative to your opponent. And that reflects the fact that they just bought their units at the end of their turn and you have not yet bought your units. So at the end of your turn, you'll buy, and then at the start of their turn, they'll be down half their army, or half their income in army value. So what does that mean? Specifically here in this game, my income is 52,000 per turn on this turn. And my army value is 250,000, whereas his is 48,000 per turn, and his army value is 276,000. Sorry, big numbers. So right here we're about even. That's what that means. Let's fast forward a little bit and see after his attack. So now it's the start of my turn. If everything was equal here, if I was even with him at the start of my turn, I would be at about 330,000, 340,000. But I'm not. I'm down I'm basically down 50k army value at the start of my turn. I'm also down a ton of units. about 13. But the important thing to note is that we're in the middle of a brawl, which means that that value is going to swing pretty wildly at the end of each player's counterattack. So it's important. It's a good way to track who's ahead, but there are other factors that matter too. It also doesn't account for crippled units. So like, say, we have a bunch of like low HP units. Well, they're going to be contributing to the army value, but they may not be very useful. Like say he has a bunch of like 2 HP tanks or something. They're not really doing anything. They can't fight. But with Andy, potentially I can heal them back up and gain a lot of army value that way. And then there's other factors too that matter. Of course, income is very important over the course of the game. Your unit count, very important. Power charge is also a resource that matters a lot, especially in high funds, because powers can be so impactful. And then finally, just the position and where the units are arranged, that matters a lot. It can make up for a difference in army value. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. So he's going to finish off a bunch of my units here in the middle, as many as he can. He just wants to clear them so they can't heal. He's going to shoot my battleship. Just make me spend 2,800 repairing that. I guess the thinking is the fighter has like multiple targets. Okay, so now my battleship gets a shot. Both of our battleships are doing something. I guess I just move my fighter down there. That's the best thing for it to do. I get another bomber hit on a Neo tank. I think before I killed a medium tank with it. I don't remember. But I just want to clear as many of those big tanks as possible. Okay, so now I think we're approaching the late game here. I've got a large consolidation of units down here, ready to kind of continue fighting over this area. Oh, okay, so I've got, my rocket is in position. It's going to interrupt this capture, very important. If he captures airport, not only is that like it's going to swing the income, back in his direction. He needs to flip properties basically in order to win. But so delaying this is good. But I have a backup rocket, so I can cover it. And knocking this down to 3 HP, that's going to delay the capture for 3 more turns. So that's like plus 6k for me and minus 6k for him, as compared to if he had just captured this next turn. So that's almost the value of the rocket right there. Okay, let's see what he does. So we're looking at army value again. If we were perfectly even, he would be at about 320,000. But he's down about 50k. But there's another piece here that you have to consider when you're looking at army value. You have to check whether units are active or not. So obviously, like, this fighter is not active, but it will be next turn. Inactive just means that it's got a job to do. It's got, a unit that it can attack, or it can threaten or do something. Now this carrier, though, it was originally built to lock down this airport and win this fight in this corner. But now we've shifted down in this direction. So I'm keeping all my air units out of range of the carrier, which means that until this has something to do again, he's basically down another 30k army value. And so he's basically down 80k, which is kind of a lot at this point. I've got my rockets set up here, ready to counterattack if he shoots one of them. Okay, so this is important. So obviously he's got his superpower charged up here because there's just so much money on the field that fighting for like 1 or 2 turns is going to charge either of our superpowers all the way. I have this huge cluster of units here in the middle, and I'm really concerned that they're going to get hit by Rachel missiles. So I create this magnet down here, but it's not a very good magnet, or at least it's not a very resilient magnet, because he's going to make one attack with his Neo tank and destroy my anti-air, and that's going to divert the missiles back up here into the center, which is really sad. I didn't do a very good job of baiting. So you see 2 missiles hit here. All these units are at 4 HP. It's going to be really easy for him to clean that up. He gets the shot on the rocket. It's on a shoal, so that's a 1-hit kill. It's going to kill a Neo tank. A tank. Finish off the anti-air and the artillery and the bomber and another tank. So you're getting a ton of kills now. So things are swinging back in the other direction now. It's starting to look bad again for me. You see, he still has not captured the city. He really wants it, though. He really wants that city. This is probably the best city for him to attack. Aside from this one, probably, now that he's got this. Although the battleship, this is just like locked down from either side. All right, so you can see now I'm down. So let's subtract the carrier from his army value. That puts him at 284,000, which means that I'm down about 50,000, which is not as bad. Not as bad as it looks if you're just looking at this mass of units. But I also have my superpower charged, and I've got a few things to heal now, including this Neo tank, which is at 6. He's got a lot of his Neo tank is in range of my battleship and my artillery. And he's got 3 anti-air to deal with my bomber and my fighter, but they are all on roads and they're pretty exposed. So let's see what happens here. I'm gonna cripple this Neo tank with the indirects. Fighter clears his battlecopter and opens the way for the bomber to come in. I'm gonna take my shot at the battleship. So we see, I think we invested about the same amount of money into this airport. He had a battleship plus an infantry, that's 29,000. I had 2 rockets, that's 30,000. And now I basically have won this trade because this is crippled. He can't do that much damage to my rocket, and so I can finish off the infantry next turn and prevent it from ever capturing that. You see, my T-copters are still alive. The one from earlier that got knocked down to 6, it got healed back up, but it has no fuel now. It has 0 fuel. and I had to move it out of the way so a different unit could attack this infantry, I think. That's kind of funny. All right, so I'm going to be targeting these anti-airs. And I get to clear his fighter. I bring in 2 extra Neo tanks for the next turn. And now after my attacks, things are looking really good for me again. I want as much impact as soon as possible, so I'm going to build a Neo tank and a bomber. And those can reach the front in like 2 turns. And see, looking at army value once again, if we were even, he would be at 280,000, more or less. But he's at just over 200,000. We can subtract the carrier. Nothing is in range of the carrier. It's probably not going to do anything for the rest of the game. So this is like a dead unit. We can even subtract this battleship. It's locking this property, but it's probably not going to be doing much because now the fight is in the center. My battleship is probably also not doing anything. But yeah, you can see that when you start taking out these big chunks from his army value of inactive units, that his position is even worse than it looks. Although his unit count is not bad. We've just been brawling so much, I've managed to knock out a lot of his tech units, and he's going to decide to resign here. So let's do a count real quick. I've got 4 Neo tanks in the fight next turn. He's got, I guess, 2. I've got a bomber and a fighter. He's got 1 fighter. He doesn't really have any anti-air left. So he's going to struggle to deal with both of these, and he's going to struggle to deal with any of these because he only has 1 unit that can really threaten them now. And this is basically a losing position for him. He resigns. There's not much you can do. My strategy of having more Neo tanks than he can deal with paid off. But yeah, I think that this was a really neat game. A lot of interesting things happened. I think that Witty got more use out of his powers than I did. He used them really well. I did a lot of damage with both of them. I think my composition was a little bit better. I managed to stay out of range of his carrier, which made that kind of a dead buy after a certain point. I managed to focus on his heavy tanks and gain an advantage in heavy tanks in the brawling. And that's pretty much what it came down to in the end. So I hope you enjoyed this game. Thanks for watching. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. I thought Woody played really well. It was a fun one. And I'll see you next time. I'll be back soon. Thanks.